Andy Culligan, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for doing this. Andy, you are a marketing leader, actually a fractional CMO, a CRO, and marketing advisor. You are known for your straightforward approach to account-based marketing and aligning marketing and sales teams to drive revenue growth or commercial success. You've held key marketing leadership positions at a fair few SaaS companies, including the likes of MRSys, which is now acquired by SAP, Exponia, acquired by Bloomreach, and Leadfeeder, which is now EchoBot. I was looking at your website, and I'll just make sure I get this right, but it says, let's turn marketing into a revenue machine, and that certainly piqued my interest. So I went looking for a few stats to support this argument of is marketing done effectively? And just a few stats that I came across for listeners. 79% of marketing leads never convert into sales due to poor nurturing practices. 73% of marketing qualified leads are never even contacted by sales teams. And companies with misaligned teams achieve 208% less revenue compared to organizations with connected marketing and sales functions. And lastly, marketing content often goes unused by sales teams, leading to duplicate efforts and wasted resources. So there's a fair sized problem, especially with SaaS companies, and I would say perhaps even with those in the B2B space, more generally speaking. You've worked at these companies that I mentioned in the introduction, and I'm curious, how would you say that your perspective on marketing has changed because of your experiences in those companies?
I don't think my perspective on marketing has changed a huge amount. I always seen marketing as a supporting function to help the business grow. Mm-hmm. I probably earlier in my career I wouldn't have seen marketing as a revenue driving function. I wouldn't have had that type of exposure like I did when I came into SaaS. So I've been in SaaS tech now for over 10 years or so, and before that I was in a multinational, and it was very traditional marketing that we were doing, although we were trying to apply some of the modern methodology to it, like in terms of lead generation and driving marketing qualified leads and sales qualified leads, etc. But it was a very old school industry and very old school business, so it wasn't necessarily the same as what you'd anticipate or what you would see at a SaaS company or in the tech space. But I think the thing that really changed for me was that how much marketing can actually support the growth of the business. Like if done correctly, you can unlock a key to growth that you didn't realize you had. And I spoke yesterday even with a CEO of a company that's looking to grow, and this CEO is an engineer. Mm-hmm. So actually his background is in engineering, and he's reached out to me now to try to help him to understand how to build a marketing organization that can help them achieve that next stage of growth, because he knows where he wants to bring the business. Mm-hmm. So he's got a very clear vision in terms of where the business needs to go, and he's got a sales effort, and he does have some limited marketing resource, but they're not being used very effectively. And he's recognized himself that the key to where he needs to, or the delta that he's missing in his entire outfit is now that marketing. And that's, if he's able to unlock that, that's when he's going to get that next stage of growth. And in the past, my previous roles and working with multinationals, I just didn't have that sort of his vision.
I'd love to dive into some of the details there in a bit, but before I do that, I'm also curious, given your journey to date, what would you say is your personal area of strength?
I've got a few, right? So where demand generation is something that I'm particularly good at. That's where I don't pat myself on the back too much, but that's really where I did most of my learning, was probably in demand generation. And also I put demand generation and brand together because I think they go hand in hand. So if I was to say an area that is particularly good, that I'm particularly good at, would be that demand generation, brand, and lead generation. Mm-hmm. On top of that, then, if that's to work, the only way for that to work is to get alignment between marketing and sales. So I'm particularly good at that as well, having started my career as a seller. So I started after I left uni. Or even before I left uni, I was doing all types of sales jobs, weird and wonderful sales jobs, from selling gym memberships on the street in Dublin in December for commission only to like working at an amusement park in the US selling tickets. So like doing all types of jobs, right? It was always sales. But then I went in and became a sales development rep at an organization when I first left uni. And then I went into an account management role or an AE role, account executive role. Did that for a number of years before I went back into marketing again. So I understand the plight of the salesperson, let's say. So I can see both sides of the coin. And with that, I tend to have a very good relationship with sellers. And as you mentioned at the head of this call, I also don't just offer marketing services, I also offer sales services. So I have been a chief revenue officer as well. And I also manage SDR teams. So like I'm probably in a minority of marketers that have also been a chief revenue officer.
Certainly. Yeah.
So that's something that, yeah, I think it lends a lot to what I've just mentioned there around marketing being this like commercial driving function.
With this, in this area of strength of demand generation and brand, what would you say is something that businesses don't know but should?
So people often there's a couple of things. So one is probably trying to find one specific channel that works, or trying to find, I'll tell you the mistakes that people make, right? I don't think there's anything like people always come to me like, what's the secret sauce? And the secret sauce is just bloody hard work and doing it day in, day out. That's like the secret. If you're going to do anything, make sure you're doing it often and consistently. Same with this podcast, Vinny, right? If you're running this podcast, you do 3 episodes and you just hope that this is going to be successful, then it's never going to work, right? If you want to do something, make sure you're doing it consistently, and it's not going to work every single time. And it may not be something that you're able to pinpoint to be a revenue driver for you. All of the sum of all the parts makes the whole. So and without one of those parts, you may not have the whole. That's probably like a piece of advice that I would give. Because typically what I see is, a simple example would be, hey, you need to tell me how many $100,000 a year opportunities are you going to drive from that specific LinkedIn campaign that you're running? I'm like, probably 0 if you're looking to find some direct attribution between that and a specific opportunity. Like, it's almost impossible to track without some sophisticated software, which you're not going to want to invest in. Like, everybody's always, we need to have this really sophisticated attribution model, but nobody wants to pay for it. So it's like marketing teams are put under massive pressure to try to prove their worth. And the thing is, when it comes to marketing, use your common sense. If it makes sense, if your prospect base is on a specific channel and you're creating content that's going to be interesting to your prospect base, and your prospect base are putting eyeballs on that content, why should that be a concern? Like, why would you want to dig any deeper? The thing is, when we're selling, it depends what you're selling, of course, as well. Like, it depends if you're running a sales-led model, which has high ticket prices, right? It's a very different play, right? But if you're talking about high ticket items, you should be trying to have as many touch points within those organizations as possible. And don't worry too much about, hey, has that one touch point driven opportunities for me? Not how it works. We're not selling bubbles. It's not transactional. It's like, it's a part of the relationship build. And that's like something that I see on a very problematic level with a lot of companies and marketers, because their C-levels or CFOs in particular, like, they want to know, okay, you spend €1 on LinkedIn, I need to know the exact outcome of that euro or dollar. And that's not how it works, right? There are other efficiency metrics that you can look at, which we can dig into now in a moment. But to go back to the point as well, so there's this attribution issue. You need to have strong-headed marketers to be able to have that argument with a CFO, which I do daily, right? I'll die on that hill. I'm absolutely fine to do that. And on the other hand, you also have this consistency issue, right? Because people then say, oh, let's start a podcast. And then they're like, okay, 3 episodes in, oh, we don't have that much time anymore. Let's just let that fizzle out. Or, oh, the CFOs come and said, how much revenue has that 2 podcast episodes done? How much revenue is that driven? And you're like, I can't directly tie it back to revenue. Okay, stop it then. It's not working. No, let's keep going. And not every single thing is going to be amazing. But the more of them that you do, the better you get at it, the more exposure you're likely to get, the more content that you have. If you're bringing people on that are specific, like that are interesting to your listener base, then eventually you're going to start picking up a head of steam, right? But you need to keep on doing it week in, week out, week in, week out. And that's where the wheels start to come off a little bit for people.
Right. I get your point of attribution and consistency. But with this point of consistency, is there perhaps this notion that marketing is something that we don't necessarily need a marketing department as such or a CMO as such to govern or run, and that there are people within the organization who could perform that function?
Yeah, I think you have that quite often, but I think that, as I said, normally founders or CEOs will come to the realization that eventually they're going to need it, unless they completely have their head buried in the sand. And then it's often too late then. It's often, shoot, we actually could have unlocked this a long time ago. And then what they typically end up doing, they end up making the wrong investment early on. They bring in the wrong person, or they either bring in somebody way too senior or way too junior.
Okay.
And it's likely the way too junior because they don't want to invest in it. So they're afraid of spending too much money. So they way underspend and they bring somebody really junior in that means well, but doesn't necessarily know what they're doing and doesn't have the experience to maybe push back at people with reason. So it's fine. So I'm not afraid to speak my mind, but I can do that because of the amount of experience that I have. I've got almost 20 years of experience, and I've worked now with, I don't know, nearly 30 different companies or more even, right? So I've seen it all. So I don't know how many millions of euro or dollars in budget I've had let go to waste because of mistakes that I've made and so on. So, but that takes years, right? And that comes at a price, right? It's not on paper, you're like, oh, that's actually expensive. But actually it's probably costing you less money because you're making less mistakes. So you bring somebody in that's maybe a bit too junior, and that junior person is going to be pushed around, is going to be told what to do, and they're basically just going to become an order taker from the sales team, an order taker from whoever else in the business might need things. And very quickly you're going to find that your marketing team, instead of them being a revenue driving function, they're the function that do the t-shirts for the business room, or that they make sure that the roll-ups are looking nice, or that the logo's looking okay on the outside wall of the office, or that they're the ones that make sure that the Christmas party is organized nicely. Like those type of things that, okay, fine, if somebody needs to do it, grand, but that's not going to be the core focus.
Certainly.
So, yeah.
So that's an interesting point. I would imagine that you've worked with companies who have gone from Series A to Series C and beyond. At what point in time does a company know it's ready for, say, fractional leadership versus a full-time CMO?
It depends on the business is the answer to that. But yeah, typically we don't work with anything too early stage. So anything that's like, obviously nothing, I don't work with anything that doesn't have product market fit. That makes no sense because they just don't have the budgets to be able for it to make sense. Normally the type of companies that I would work with would be just post at Series A, maybe even Series B. I am currently working with a Series C organization at the moment as well. It depends on the DNA of the organization as well. If they have a sales team set up that don't really have massive marketing support existing already, and they are in that type of organization that I mentioned before, that they maybe started a little bit late with the focus on marketing, which is often the case when it comes to even Series B organizations, especially in Europe. The US, I think, is a bit different, but in Europe, that's typically where my services would come in. And the thing is with it, right? Like the way that I work would be to say, I can almost put myself out of a job, right? I'll get your team up to the point where they're being autonomous. They know what they're doing. They know what the plan is. They've got focus. The CEO doesn't need to step in anymore. I'll have a voice at the table with the rest of the C-suite. And at the same time, I'll help you find somebody senior to come in and fill my role. So I'll help you find that CMO. To find a CMO can take months, if not a year. And at the same time, you may not feel like you're ready for a CMO just yet. Maybe you've just made some other C-level hires. So you might have had a chief revenue officer, and maybe the marketing team is rolling up into the chief revenue officer, which is a terrible idea in my opinion, by the way. But because it's just too much as well to put on a chief revenue officer's plate as well. And I would just make sure that one of the important points then is, it's very quickly to get somebody in there to be able to manage and run the team for you. So I can start in the morning. You know, there's a difference between full-time support and part-time support like we offer. It's like, it's an overnight thing. Hey, Vinny, you've got the need for it. Okay, let's get somebody in immediately to help.
Certainly. Just for clarity's sake, I'm just going to try and reframe what you've said. So my takeaway as such would be, that really you're getting some hiring a full-time CMO?
You find yourself in a position where you maybe have a marketing leader that's not quite senior enough to bring the team up to the next level of scale. And the team don't really know what the right way up is. The CEO is quasi the person that's running marketing through that director of marketing. And the CEO doesn't want to do that any longer. And that's normally where I come in and take over. That's
okay. Certainly. Yeah. And as a company goes from Series A and beyond, how would you suggest that relationships between marketing and revenue generation change as the company scales?
Yeah, it depends if the company has. So obviously the company has it. So in this case where you're referring to, I'm going to take the assumption that this company hasn't had marketing focused on revenue at all, which I believe should be the case from day one, right? Or as best you can from day one, right? You should be doing activities that make sense, that are going to deliver back leads, right? Or are going to be delivering back revenue at the end of the day. As you grow and scale, I think the need for demand generation and brand get much higher. So let's say, for example, you've scrapped all the way to 10 million in annual recurring revenue. Let's take that. And in that case, when you're scrapping all the way to 10 million, you're probably doing a lot of hacky type of things, which will drive some leads through the door, which will get conversations for the sales team, etc., which will get leads in, right? Then you get into another arena where you're, especially in the tech space, if you're starting to compete against some of the bigger players in your industry. So you've gone from this like 0 to 10 million in a number of years, and now you want to unlock another key to growth, which is maybe 10 to 30 million. And in order to get that 10 to 30 million, you really need to establish your brand. So maybe you've gone from this like very like lead gen focused thing, scrappy plays, let's just like hack events and stuff like that, to being like, okay, if we go to an event, or if we're going to make an investment in an event, we need to have like obviously like a demand generation piece on, or a lead generation piece on it. So like the structure will be every single trade show we go to, we have a side event whereby we invite our top customers or top prospects in together in a room, and we get them chatting, we offer some content, drinks, dinner, whatever. Then we make that investment, plus we do a brand play at the event itself, which is not necessarily something that you're going to be able to tie directly back to a revenue driving thing, but it's like something that you're going to have to get that brand bigger in front of those bigger organizations in order to stand out against your competitors. Because as you grow in revenue, you're going to be coming up against these bigger competitors, and you're going to have to show that you're also up there with them. So that's one of the things that I've been learning as businesses grow. You need to invest more in brand activities, not just stuff that's going to drive the leads in at the top of the funnel.
A very interesting point there. And I'm curious, if you're making play for brand-related things, I would assume that you'd want the buy-in and the cooperation of senior executives within the company, perhaps namely the CEO. And when you mentioned events, I would think that a brand-related activity might be him or her doing a keynote at an event or a conference, for example, which would take time and energy on their part to prepare a keynote and things of that nature. How do you help them see that such activities, if they've never done it before, would be valuable in the long run?
If they've never done it before, I'd be questioning if they're the right person for the keynote, to be honest with you. I agree with the approach, by the way, and that's something that would be just out of the playbook from day one anyway, to try to get on stage as best you can. You should be identifying thought leaders within the organization that will be able to get up on stage, that will be able to gain a voice on social, for example, that will be able to represent the company in front of larger crowds, right? Which is typically the CEO. So in most cases, CEOs understand the value of that. You don't need to sell it too much. But if they're the CEO that wants to hide behind their desk, and then they're definitely not the right person to get up on stage anyway. Right. So then you need to find who the right person is internally. It's likely that the CEO, let's take the scenario that you just painted there, and I know I'm turning this on its head a little bit on you, but if you have a CEO that doesn't like to do that, and hence why they haven't been doing it, if you've got that CEO, then you say to that person, they're likely to understand the importance of getting the name in front of more people in the room and getting up on stage and speaking. Then they're unlikely to say that's a terrible idea. I don't think it's a good idea for us to represent our brand in front of all of these key people. If that's the case, and you find somebody else internally, and then you've got the buy-in from the CEO anyway, because they're like, okay, great, we have somebody else that can do it that's better than me, and I don't want to do it anyway. So in that case, I agree with you. Like, definitely the right approach. If the CEO is not the person to do it, that's also fine. But I don't think you'll have too hard of a time selling it. I think as a general, like selling brand to the CEO, I think if you're able to prove it in the types of conversations that are being had on a sales level with the types of brands that you want to win, or if those are improving and getting more and more over a quantified period of time, let's say over a half year or to over a year, then that's how you then quantify that. That's how you then show, like, you go in with that conversation, say, when we go and invest in this, we will start to have a voice in those larger deals. We will get more RFPs coming our way. We will have more conversations with bigger brands that we want to win. And that's how you show if that activity is working.
Interesting. Again, just for clarity, would it be fair to say that a good metric to monitor would be the number of conversations and the frequency of conversations that you're having with your potential prospects in order to ensure that there is enough of a cadence to eventually lead to sales type conversations and closed deals?
It's yes and no, I would say. So I'm going to answer. Yes, in the way that you should be measuring those conversations, and that is something that you should be measuring. However, you should be looking at the companies that you're managing to talk to, and there's a couple of signals, right? So if you're running an account-based marketing model, which most companies have some relative account-based thing, there's something, they have something in mind. But if you're able to say, okay, we've got a couple of different types of companies that we go after. We've got our tier 1s, tier 2s, and tier 3s. Let's say our tier 1s they're like the really like amazing companies that we want to work with. These are like the top tier companies that we want to go after. I'd be measuring it in that way. So if I'm investing heavily in brand, I'd be like, okay, how many tier 1 companies have we managed to engage now since we started doing this activity? It's not necessarily, I wouldn't look at it as like from a top down being like, how many conversations have we had? To be like, okay, how many conversations have we had at top tier, as opposed to last year when we couldn't get any visibility at all in those top tier accounts, and now we're having regular conversations with them. And then I'd also be basing it off how much pipeline are we managing to open up within each of those different tiers. So like I that's why I said yes and no. I would be careful with looking at it as a whole. I'd rather be looking at it based on those important accounts that we want to win. And then also I'd be looking at things like, is our average deal size starting to increase? Because as we start to go after bigger brands, our average deal size should start to go up, right?
So, and just thinking along that train of thought, would it be also fair to say that your CRM should be your source of truth?
CRM should always be the source of truth.
Okay.
If it's not in the CRM, it doesn't exist.
Yeah. I'm curious, with communication, obviously with alignment and changing structures, communication is essential. Is there a framework that you would use for creating effective communication cadences between marketing, sales, and SDR teams?
One of the things, so let's start with marketing and SDRs maybe, and then we can also do marketing and sales. I prefer as a marketing leader to own the SDR team as well. Okay. And this is something I've done most of the times when I've been a full-time CMO, is take on SDRs. The reason for that is because they're like the next line of attack, probably the wrong word to say, but they are the human version of the digital marketing, let's say. So they're the ones that then, based on any marketing interactions that happen between a prospect and the organization, any brand interactions or whatever, they're the human interface to be able to create a relationship. So marketing can only do so much, but the SDR unlocks this next door to be able to create a relationship with a prospect, but gets them up to the point where they're going to be like, okay, maybe I should have a chat with this company. And this is, in order for that to have a nice streamlined approach, you should have SDRs and marketing working hand in hand. So SDRs should be using whatever messaging marketing is creating. They should be using whatever content marketing is creating in order to make sure that the message is consistent across both teams. Because let's use a simple example. If I'm buying something as a consumer and I click on an ad and I want to go buy a new pair of shoes, a new pair of Nikes, and I click on that new pair of Nikes in an ad, and I land on a landing page and a product page which has a new pair of Adidas there, I'm going to be like, what's going on here? And that's similar to when you have marketing saying one message in B2B SaaS. You've got marketing saying one message and this is what we offer as a product, and then the SDR does an outreach as the next touch point, and somebody sees an email in their inbox which is completely opposite to what the marketing message has been. So it causes this confusion and it ends up a confused prospect, right, which we want to avoid. So there's that. That's like everything pre-pipeline creation, right? Then when it gets to sales, like the SDR team then needs to make sure that they're well aligned into the sales outfit, so that if they're booking meetings. Now remember, SDRs are part of marketing at this point. If SDRs are booking meetings for the AE team, the account executive team, the SDRs need to make sure that they're booking qualified meetings. So they need to be going through some qualification process. Those qualified meetings then go over to the account executives, then decide what the next steps are. Then once they get the qualified meeting, they then need to move it to qualified pipeline, which means it enters into the pipeline. It can then eventually then become a closed won customer. The point there is that there needs to be a feedback loop between sales back to SDRs to say, okay, this is either something that's good or bad. Then that information should then also be put back into the marketing motion as well. If it's good or bad, okay, bring in more of those type, and we should focus more on those type of companies. Or, hey, why did we bring in this type of company? It's not a right fit for us, right? We can also bring that back into the marketing outfit via the SDR team back into the marketing team. And then once stuff gets into the qualified pipeline, you've got sales and marketing working in unison as well. That sales then say, hey guys, we have just opened opportunities with XYZ brands. Can we please make sure that we get these into a motion whereby we're targeting them more? We're putting them into our account-based marketing plays. For example, we're sending them the direct mailers, or we're targeting them heavily on digital. So one of the plays that I would use in the past would be whenever something went into opportunity phase, the sales team would simply put into a Slack channel, hey, this opportunity needs to be targeted heavily. And we would just go and make sure that the first thing they see in the morning is our brand, and the last thing they see in the night is our brand. And we do things like target them heavily with like customer case studies in video form, which works really nicely. Things like that, direct mailers, invite them to dinners, the list goes on, right? And then that's that feedback loop coming back into the sales org as well, right? So sales and marketing working together, sales and SDRs working together, SDRs and marketing working together.
Brilliant. Would that also be part of the alignment process within the first 90 days of perhaps coming into an organization where you've got these siloed revenue teams?
So, sorry, repeat that. Would I do that? So
if you were to come into an organization within the first 90 days, would that, what you just described, be very much part of the playbook, especially when you're dealing with teams that have been previously siloed?
Yeah, get everyone talking to one another. Mix it up. People hate it. Oh, Jesus, people hate it because I come in and kick over tables and I'm like, you need to go to talk to that person. You need to go talk to that person. Like, I'm not talking to that person. So people absolutely hate it. Absolutely hate it. But it's change. Absolutely. So to answer your question, yes, absolutely. Is that my playbook in the first 90 days? Yes, absolutely.
Okay, brilliant. The marketing team, let's say you're coming in to help an organization set up their marketing. They've probably got a handful of people that are performing some sort of marketing functions. How would you have them evolve through different stages of growth?
So the question is based on the people that are in the marketing team, how would I have them level up basically during the growth phase?
Level up, and I use that word very broadly because it might be that they're quite equipped for the next level of growth.
Yeah, that's the thing. So I think, look, when you're going through those levels of growth, the company itself changes. Like it becomes almost like a different organization. It doesn't almost become like a different organization. It becomes a different organization. The DNA of the company can change. Culture can change, unfortunately, unless it's really hard work to keep a culture the same as it was. I think a culture develops. People will ultimately end up just leaving just because they enjoyed let's say, the 0 to 5 million ride, and the 5 to 10 million ride is not for them. You're ultimately going to have those people. And I think you can have people in the organization that are willing to roll the sleeves up and grow themselves with the growth of the organization. I think you need to have a very specific mindset in the team where they're like, okay, I don't know what I don't know. So I understand I've been in this journey now for whatever, let's say 10 to 20. And now I know that 20 to 30 is going to be completely different. And I need to accept that. A lot of the time I see people that don't want to accept it. And they say, no, what worked at 20 or what worked at 10 to 20 should work at 20 to 30. And it's not necessarily the case. Yeah. So they need to be open to wanting to change. And I think that's probably the most important thing, and open to people telling them how it works. And then just rolling the sleeves up and putting the head down and moving with it. And sometimes, a lot of the time, they end up leaving. I think the majority, it's a minority that will stick around for the full journey. That's just how it is.
Yeah. I'm also thinking of bringing sales into the conversation here. What would your approach be to creating marketing strategies that sales teams will actually use?
So I think, you need to, first of all, you need to create an account-based play, because the sales team in any case are going after specific accounts. They typically have their account book, right? So if you say, okay, Vinny, you're the seller, right? And I say, okay, which accounts are you trying to win, Vinny? Like, give me your account list. Okay, let's create some plays together in terms of how marketing can support. Do you want to get more face time with, I don't know, McDonald's? I'm just throwing a name out there, big brand. So you want to get more face time with the head of brand management at McDonald's? Yes, I do. I've been trying to reach this person forever. Okay, what if we say that we want to create like a playbook in order for you to get in there? So what does that mean, Vinny? It would mean marketing would invest in events that we know that McDonald's head of brand management is going to be there. Great. Okay, so you're going to invest in events. Yes, we will invest in events. On the side of that event, we'll also pay for a Michelin star restaurant for you to bring that person to, alongside a couple of other prospects and maybe a couple of our customers. So that our customers be able to showcase how happy they are with our product and so on, and they'll be able to rub shoulders with our customer base. On top of that, we'll also then put them into digital plays, so that we make sure that we're targeting the heck out of McDonald's every time they're on LinkedIn, or we'll also do some display advertising against those specific accounts. Top of that, we can also then do things like direct mailers. So we can do bespoke direct mailers once a quarter, where we spend a couple of $100s on putting something together, which we send the post to that specific brand manager as well as the rest of their team. Does that sound like a good idea, Vinny? And you'd be like, sure, let's, why would you not want that if you're trying to gain some exposure within those accounts of marketing and just saying, hey, we'll give you a hand. And that goes against your top list of accounts. So that's how I typically do it.
I'm sure that you've had these conversations that I've also been part of, where there is this overwhelming need for short-term revenue goals to be achieved, as well as keeping the long-term strategic marketing initiatives on the go as well. I'm curious, how do you help people find balance with those two competing needs?
I think in tech, it's always short-term revenue goals, unfortunately. But it depends, right? So here's the thing. It depends on the type of business that you're winning. So let's focus again on high-ticket SaaS. Like high-ticket SaaS companies that are selling large deal sizes. Large deal sizes typically mean longer sales cycles. So I'm never somebody to beat around the bush here. If you don't have pipeline existing with those larger deal sizes, then you're not going to have short-term turnaround. That's the thing. But we need to work on growing that pipeline. But we're in a situation here, guys, where we don't have the pipeline in order for us to hit our targets in 18 months from now, if we have an 18-month sales cycle. And that's a hard pill for people to swallow. But marketing are not going to be able to come in and click their fingers and make magic happen and make sure that stuff is that would normally close in 18 months, close in 3. That's completely unrealistic. That's on the sales-led side. If we're talking about PLG, so product-led growth companies, so volume SaaS. Volume SaaS organizations have low ticket items. So they're maybe getting, let's say their monthly recurring revenue from an individual customer might be $100. for example, rather than $100,000 in some cases with some high ticket SaaS companies. Then it's a very different play. Then you can turn things around relatively quickly there. The things that you would need to look at everything that the current company is doing in terms of like in a high volume SaaS play, they're typically spending a lot of money on Google to bring people through a free trial motion. Are the campaigns that they're running on Google currently being profitable or not? What does that mean? It means, okay, looking at are the signups that we're driving into a free trial motion turning into revenue at the end of the day or not? Typically companies might have a 2-week free trial, right? Send them in via Google. They land on a landing page. There might be many breaks within that. Either they might be spending money on the wrong keywords, which I've seen many times, which is basically just confusing to people that are then signing up for the free trial, and that they're doing the trial or kicking the tires a little bit and being like, this isn't really what was advertised. To go back again to this Nike and Adidas example I gave before, it's similar in that world, right? All the way down to maybe not having dedicated landing pages for the keywords in which you're bidding on, right? Which again, you're spending a lot of money to get clicks to land on a landing page, but once they land there, it's again, what's this actually? This isn't what I was looking for. And I've seen very often that companies just they're not bidding on the right keywords, or the keywords that they are bidding on, they're not being profitable at all, and they just have massive burn. So in those high volume SaaS situations, I'd be looking at every stage of the funnel and trying to understand, okay, do we have a breakup at the top of the funnel, or is it when people come into the product? If it's when people come into the product, what are we doing in there to onboard them better and make sure that they're turning into paid customers? It's two different plays.
Certainly.
Sales-led, product-led.
Certainly. With, say, a high-ticket product or service, what would be your framework for determining the marketing budget allocation across different growth stages?
Depends what your growth rate, what you want to. So what's your target? So again, it's a bit of a how long is a piece of string, right? It's so if I'm having that conversation with a CEO, because I've had that asked of me many times, how much money do I need to spend in marketing next year? I'm like, I don't know. It's a very quick answer to that, but it's okay. How do we figure that out? You figure that out by looking at, okay, what's the growth rate next year? Where's our current revenue at? What is our marketing spend been this year? What has been our growth rate this year? How do we look at, okay, which markets do we want to grow into? For example, if I want to grow massively in the US, I know that the US is more expensive than other markets, so we're going to have to put more money into the US market. But if we want to grow in other markets at the same time, we'll probably have to keep spend consistent there. So there's many different variables that play a role here. Generally, I'd be looking at trying to figure out like a cost per opportunity.
Right.
And trying to keep that cost per opportunity down as, let's say I'm happy with a cost per opportunity of maybe 5K, something like that. But I'd be also looking at efficiency metrics for the organization. So there's many different variables at play in here. So efficiency metrics for the organization would be things like lifetime value to customer acquisition cost. So is that being efficient? Typically, an efficient one would be 3 to 1. So the length that I'm managing to keep a customer is 3 times longer than what I spend on that customer. Rule of 40 is another one. Like I'd be trying to use as many of those metrics as possible to figure out, okay, what can I actually spend? And then as a commercial organization, and sitting with the CFO will typically have that information. And in any case, like the CFO at the end of the day normally knows what we can spend on marketing based on what's left over after all of the other functions. That's normally the way it works. But to break it down, I would say, okay, which markets do we want to grow in? If we want to grow massively in the US, we need to put more money in because the US is going to be more expensive than everywhere else.
Certainly. Okay. A lot to chew through there. I'm also keeping an eye on the time. Maybe a couple more questions. What would you say are key indicators that signal when a company should scale its SDR team?
It's a good question. So I think, one of the things that I've seen work really well with SDRs is if you're a company that invests heavily in events, and you want to make sure that you're managing to get as many meetings booked as possible for an AE team that are going to be at events, then an SDR team makes a huge amount of sense. They drive the investment to a new level on events. So in comparison to what I've seen typically from AEs, because they're focused so much on closing that they're not that focused on driving stuff from an events perspective. If you're in a position whereby you feel yourself, you're not creating enough pipeline as well as that. So I would say if pipeline is drying up a little bit and you really need to drum up the amount of exposure that you're getting into accounts or that you're getting from accounts, you need to start thinking about, okay, an SDR is feet on the ground that will be able to go after as many accounts as possible and get the message out in front of as many people as possible on accounts. Another thing on top of that is if you're going into a new market, it can make sense to have a local SDR resource that understands that market a little bit better in order to get more meetings booked in for an AE. Again, AEs should be focused on closing and should be focused on running demos, right? Rather than doing mass outreach. And that's essentially what SDRs need to do. So I think as the company grows, like your question was, how do you know when to scale it? Or how do you know when to hire more? If the company is growing, you should be hiring more. You just need to know how to use an SDR properly, which most companies don't.
Okay. That's an interesting point there. Why would you say that?
Because the SDR is the kindergarten of the organization, and nobody wants to give them the time or want is too strong a word. Nobody has the time to hold their hand. The issue is that it's the SDR typically report into the sales function. So they're either reporting into a VP of sales, or they're reporting into a chief revenue officer or director of sales, whatever it might be. And that person just doesn't have the time to make sure that they're doing all the right behavior. So you typically have a very junior person in the organization that's very green, very naive, doesn't have much experience, maybe no experience, come direct from uni. They need a lot of training, they need a lot of hand-holding, they need a lot of understanding exactly what needs to be done. Sales leaders don't have that time because they're so focused on the revenue and so focused on closing. Typically what I do with SDRs is from day one, I'm sitting down with them being like, okay, guys, this is how we create an account list. We've got 100 accounts. We need to go now find 6 to 10 people for every single one of these accounts. Okay, guys, go find 6 to 10 people that have these job titles. Put all these people into our HubSpot or into our Salesforce, into whatever CRM we're using. Now, guys, we need to go create messaging. Let's sit down together and write a load of emails together. Okay, let's sit down together and let's go through some cold call role play. Let's sit down together and let's look at how you're attacking people on LinkedIn. And you need to be doing that daily. And then what you need to be doing is attaching those contacts to a cadence. So you need to be then pushing those contacts into a cadence surrounding these people, and then digging into those people that are then showing some sign of some signal of intent. But again, you need to be sitting down with the SDRs almost daily to be like, okay, guys, have you gone after enough accounts? Have you gone after enough people on those accounts? What are your numbers looking, etc., which sales leadership just doesn't have the time for.
Makes a lot of sense. I can relate to that from personal experience. And it's been very insightful in this area of using marketing to support and drive your revenue machine. Are there perhaps a couple of areas that you find doesn't get talked about very much? If so, what would they be?
Areas that wouldn't get talked about much. It's a good question. I think so. There are a number of things that people probably don't have that much exposure to, especially in the tech space. There would be things like analyst relations, which play a massive role when it comes to when you start growing in revenue. Analyst relations is really important when you're looking to get into those larger key enterprise accounts. And I just don't think that people have that much exposure to it or that much knowledge of it or how to manage analyst relations. So that it plays a role at a certain point in growth, and people just ignore it until it gets too late when they figure out that a competitor has ended up in a Magic Quadrant by Gartner or a Forrester Wave report. And that's normally when they start paying attention that it's already too late. You've already missed a review or a report cycle at that point. So that's something important to keep an eye on as you grow and to engage with analysts, I would say.
Certainly.
Another part that people often overlook, I would say, I don't know if it's not spoken about, but it's probably overlooked, would be I think it's about getting your senior leadership involved in getting the brand to the next level. What does that mean? It means having them post often on social, for example, even write their stuff for them on social, getting them involved in more conversations outside of whatever the company does, turn them into a thought leader, right? But that's actually on the level of marketing. I've got another hot take when it comes to that, actually, on the level, when I said that's on the level of marketing rather than the leadership. I've got a bit of a hot take that actually maybe answers your question better in terms of what's not talked about. Marketing at the end of the day is still a support function to help sellers sell better, right? Which marketers hate. Right? We're not a sales support function. You are, but we're there to make it easier for when people are picking up the phone that they know they know the brand that the person has mentioned. So it's a difference between saying, "Hey, this is Andy calling from Purple Path," and them saying, "Andy from where?" to Andy from, "I've never heard of you, but I know Purple Path." Yeah, that makes sense. So that's one hot take. Another hot take is, in order for sales and marketing alignment to work, it needs to be driven by marketing. Sales are going to be focused on closing. They're always focused on the opportunities they have in their pipeline. They don't care about marketing. Like, they care that maybe they're not getting enough leads, but they don't care about trying to drive something from marketing. Marketing need to come to them and be like, "Hey, I'm here to help. Let's get me more involved with you, and let's get me more helping you to hit your goals." It's very rarely comes from the other side, other than throwing poo over the fence, I would say. So,
thank you for that. To wrap things up, if you were listening to this episode, what would you say would be your top takeaway?
I think so top takeaway from this, we've spoken a lot about scaling, right? I think just remember that different stages of an organization are not going to be for everyone. So if you've been at an organization from day one and it feels like a very different organization, it's because it is. And that's okay. Go somewhere else. Like, really, that would be my cue to exit. And that's fully okay. It's not for everyone. The other thing is around sales and marketing alignment. Just go speak with your sales team. Like, it's not that difficult. You just need to go start having conversations. And it's uncomfortable because they're not going to be happy and you're not going to be happy, but you're going to have to just grin and bear it and get through it. It is what it is. And on top of that, when it comes to investment, I think you need to focus on what makes sense. Use your common sense from a marketing perspective, in terms of what are the activities that I should do. If the activities that you're doing are getting in front of the right eyeballs within your ideal customer profile, then you should die on that hill when it comes to negotiating how much money you can have from your CFO.
And if listeners are curious, want to find out more or connect with you, where would you recommend they head to?
You can get me on LinkedIn, Andy Culligan. And I've also, in recent months as well, launched a go-to-market agency, which helps all companies of mostly that are not all shapes and sizes, but I would say that have found their product market fit, are trying to unlock that next stage of growth. We help them do that, and we've got all elements of the marketing mix as well as sales functions as well. You can find that on purplepath.io. Okay,
we'll include links to that in the show notes. Andy, this has been terrific. Thank you so much for doing this.
Sure, thanks, Vinny.